This is the Operating System Show. My name is Matt Dixon, and I'm running the show today. And today we have Sean Griffin. He's the CEO and co-founder of Truffle. And before Truffle, he scaled SimpleTexting to quite a big size. I'll let him talk about that. So he knows a thing or two about operations. So in this episode, we always talk about operations, how we can help improve things, how we can run a business without the owner even being there. So Sean, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to be here, Matt.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what interested you with this podcast.
Yeah, as CEO, right, now my hands are in many things, but I think, at the core, very much sort of an operator. It's what I've done a lot in the past. And so thought there might be an opportunity to share a few things maybe that I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks along the way and help somebody out.
Yeah, sounds great. So tell me a little bit about what the aha moment was for you to create your hiring platform.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about sort of scaling SimpleTexting, and then we were acquired, and we were an entirely remote business at the time when being a remote business was like a really shiny thing, and there weren't many sort of remote businesses out there, right? And so as we were hiring and scaling pretty quickly, we grew from about 7 people when I joined to about 150 people in a little less than 4 years, right? So we were going through sort of bigger hiring waves, and we would get 1,000, 2,000 applications for a role, right? And really good hiring was something that was sort of core to myself and some of the other owners of that business. And we found it really challenging. How do you possibly sort through 1,000 applications to find a good one? And this, continued to compound through the pandemic as remote work got, bigger. Everybody was looking for a remote role. And sort of as my time was coming to an end with SimpleTexting and then Cinch, I said, is there an opportunity to take everything that we've learned from sort of doing it ourselves and, struggling through this pain and help other businesses, and specifically small businesses, tackle the problem, right? Who often don't have the resources. They are owner operators themselves. To help streamline it in something that we were sort of pretty passionate about.
Interesting. Yeah, I worked remote with my team as well when it was still that new shiny thing. I haven't worked in an office in years, decades actually. I love it. The commute is great. My coworkers here in the office are amazing. They're my favorite people. So tell me a little bit about how you did scale SimpleText. Like, what does that look like to scale a company? Because I don't think many people realize most companies are stuck below $1 million a year. So, it's foreign territory for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's probably no hack, but there are a few things that I think we did really well. Hiring was one of them, right? So as you're bringing people in to a business that is pretty small, spending more time really understanding not only who you need along the way, but what roles are most valuable at what time. We were I probably a little bit more conservative than some other businesses in our hiring, but I think it actually played really well for us along the way. We didn't have a sales team for a very long time, so we had, sort of a customer success team that also did some sales. Now, in our model, that worked for us. And I think it gave us more leverage because we had some more sort of free cash to help grow the business in other areas. We sort of were invested heavily in SEO, right, versus going and spending a ton of money on marketing or ad spending, right? So I think having a plan and then being really intentional in executing it was really, really critical to us. Knowing when the moment is that you do have to go and hire, right? Not putting yourself too far behind, right? So you've got a bit of a pipeline, but then making that necessary move as soon as it's able. So that was, sort of very early on. Hiring was absolutely critical to our success. I would say as we started to scale, and this speaks the podcast really well, we got to a point where, we had a leadership team, and we were probably about 40 or 50 people at this point, but we didn't have a great operating model. And so we set out on a search for, what does that look like? And we explored a couple of different ones. And we settled on EOS. And so that was probably one of the biggest unlocks for us at SimpleTexting, was just settling on an operating model. And we had an EOS coach come in, who I worked really closely with to sort of get things set up in that business. And that was pretty transformational for us, getting on a really nice rhythm, doing some great goal setting, right? And holding ourselves to account through that process. And that's followed me from that business, right? We were acquired by another Australian company. We brought EOS to that business, right? And then, in my business today, we use EOS and to sort of, we're big cheerleaders.
Excellent. Yeah. And EOS is great. I've worked with a lot of businesses that do that. And then your previous business, you scaled pre-AI. Now you're scaling this business with AI. What are some of the things that are the same, and what's different about that?
Yeah. What's the same? There's not a lot there is a lot that's the same, right? I mean, I think the value of good people is probably even higher today than it was then. In a lot of ways, I would say somebody who really can understand how to utilize the tools effectively, because ultimately AI, I think, is a tool, right? It helps us. And we have spent a lot of time sort of building processes that leverage AI in the business. So what are those things that a human doesn't need to do anymore? And that's where we're really leveraging AI today. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I think, when you're in the software business and you're shipping very quickly, and today we are shipping, very, very, very quickly. We have a very small team, but we're accomplishing, a lot, is a feature release. What happens when you go to release a new feature, right? Before it was, you've got to get, sort of product marketing involved, or, you've got to ship some help center articles, and there's a whole bunch of sort of activities. And so we said, look, is there a way that we can automate a lot of this, so that way, you can do it very quickly? So now we basically have a Claude routine that runs, right? And it goes and it looks at the code, it updates our product catalog, it'll write, the help center articles, it'll write the email and ship it into Intercom that we can review and press go. We just recently finished building a pipeline that will actually produce a product feature video, right? And it'll ship it for approval. And all of this happens sort of overnight, right? And then we come in and approve it, right? And that is transformational, right? Especially when you're a smaller team, and you can do so much more. So that's I think a really great example of where AI is really good. Now, it took us a lot of time to go through and build these processes and train exactly how we would want Claude or GPT to write this stuff. But once you do, right, you get a lot of time back where we can become more strategic.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was working on a little side project, and so I write a lot of software. I don't write any code anymore, though, and I had it do a little walkthrough for me. So it recorded it launched a browser, recorded a session, and it's wild. I don't think people realize how cool it can be. Like if you think creatively, you can get some really good solutions out of it. So tell me a little bit more about EOS, and why was that transformational for your business? What exactly is in EOS that really helped you?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, sort of the planning was really important for us. We were at a stage where there was a lot of paths that you could go down. How do you ensure that everyone on the team, right, was aligned, up and down on where we were going? What was the mission? I think one of the most critical parts, actually, in the very beginning was our values, right? As an organization, what were those values? And so we spent some time, right? It actually came together very quickly. We realized that there was these implicit values, right? We hadn't made them explicit at the time, but had some great discussions, and they shifted around a little. But from that point, and when we started to communicate these to the rest of the organization, you could feel this sort of coming togetherness among everyone, right, around these values. And we really use them to measure into the future. So that was one piece, right? It's just these sort of like fundamental things that help to get everybody on the same page. And then a rhythm around, what did the leadership team meeting look like, our L10s weekly, and then everybody across the organization seeing those, and some really great transparency around those, right? We had rocks that everybody could see. We were working towards those, right? And there was some clear accountability around those things. So I would say that was one of the key pieces for us. And then, the other part, which I often talk about, was this idea of a right person, right seat, which was really big for us. Every quarter we would get together as a leadership team and really evaluate, everybody in the organization. They would do some self-reflection as well. And some of the times, these sort of exercises, I have not been a huge fan of, right? And it wouldn't take us a ton of time. I don't think it should be a massive activity, but we made some really critical decisions around, how we were organized as an overall team and who fit in each part of those teams.
Excellent. Yeah. EOS has a lot of great frameworks, and it seems like it could be overwhelming. I think that's where an EOS implementer can really help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, look, I think there's so much to EOS, right? It can be really overwhelming. And I think where we actually got and where we are today is there's a lot of the frameworks that we use. We are probably not the strictest EOS shop today. So there are some things that we've chosen. This works really well for us and we're going to keep this, or this, we are going to keep the maybe spirit of, but we're not doing fully in practice. And I think that's really important, right? Every business is a little bit different and you need to understand, sort of what's going to work for you and how you can leverage those things.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you try to follow every one of those life coaches, like I need to get up at 4 a.m, but the first thing I need to get sun, and then I need to eat 1,000,000 calories of protein, 1,000,000 grams of protein. But you can't do it all. So you need to pick one thing and then pick another and then just keep going.
Right.
Just like you do in business and everything. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your product that you're building now. What does it do, first of all?
Yeah. So Truffle is candidate screening software, effectively. And the idea is that today, right, if you're getting either a lot of applications coming in, how do you possibly sort through those applications, right, and understand who's good, who should I actually go and speak with? And there's a few sort of predicates here, right? Is that a lot of candidates today are using AI in their applications, whether it be a resume or, even sometimes on a Zoom conversation, right? Maybe they're not the real candidate. That happens, unfortunately. And so we said, how can we surface the candidates, right? And give you better signal on who it is that you should go and talk to. So that way you don't have to spend as much time, 9:00 at night when you're a solo operator, right? Looking through resumes, trying to make a guess at who you should speak to. So Truffle does really three things. It does resume screening and scoring, right? So you basically give us a job description plus create some criteria, and we sort of rank and score those resumes against the criteria to give you a short list. We never make decisions, right? So it is not automating the decision. It is surfacing signals so that you can go and do that. Then we have assessments. So there are sort of three primary types of assessments. It's all built to be very candidate friendly. So it's not like an hour-long assessment you send to a candidate. It's like a situational judgment test, 4 or 5 questions generally. And the goal there is to rank alignment, right? So the company using Truffle would say, hey, here's what we are looking for. And the candidate gives a response. We see, how closely those are aligned. We think about that as being a bit AI proof, right? AI can't give you an answer of what the business is looking for. So it's less likely to be gamed on the assessments. We do personality and an environment fit assessment as well. And then one-way interviews. So either a one-way audio or video interview that helps to create some consistency across the candidates. And it all happens without, sort of you having to go through and play scheduling Tetris, right, on that sort of first conversation. And you could use one, two, or all three of them together, right, depending on sort of where you are, where an employer is in sort of the funnel process, to get, sort of maximum signal on who you should speak with.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned that it won't make decisions, but it surfaces signals. Tell me a little bit more about that, because a signal is really an assessment and a decision, right? But it's not a yes, interview this person, or no, don't interview this person. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, probably should be more clear there, right? So we do use AI on our side, right, to go through and take a look at, for example, on a one-way video interview. You've got a question, right? And there's a scoring rubric that's built in the back end based on the job description. And we do this sort of role intake, right? Think about this as like if a recruiter was having a conversation with the business owner on what does somebody who's really good look like, or what does somebody struggle like? What would you want to get out of this new hire in the first 90 days? And so we use AI to basically score each of those questions against the job description and the rubric to say, hey, here is how that candidate ranks overall compared to what you're looking for in their response. And that's where you get some signal, right? So on interview questions, you get a score, right, out of 100 on each of the questions, which rolls up. And then on each of the other things, you get basically a level of alignment, right? Are they very highly aligned? Is it like a mid or mixed, right? Or is it a low alignment with what you're looking for in a candidate?
Excellent. Do you ever see that line between human decision and AI shifting, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's got to get a lot better before it does, and I think there's a trust factor here, right? I think which is really big. When it gets it right, it's really good. And I have seen, we do a lot of testing, right, on the models, that we're using and ensuring things are walled off and following, compliance and all of those sort of things, right? That you need, especially because it's a high risk, high leverage a task that you're asking AI to do, right? And we believe the humans should be in the loop there, actually looking at these things, right? And somebody that is pressing that button to say, yes, I want to advance this person to the next stage of the interview, or, no, right, I don't see what I'm looking for in this candidate, and passing.
Yeah. Trust is a huge thing, especially like with employees using AI. I see that a lot. They don't trust it. They don't want AI to take their job, but let's let AI do the dumb stuff. You can work in your superpower. That's the way I look at AI and employees, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So who would be a good candidate for your system for hiring, and who should look somewhere else? Like what's not a good fit? What is a good fit?
Yeah, really, I think the good fit, the best fit are those who are hiring pretty regularly, right? Like they've got some turnover in their business, right? And they're looking to have sort of a continuous pipeline of candidates coming in. I think we see people being really successful there, right? So a couple of examples, we have a couple of fast food chains, right, who are sort of constantly looking for folks. Retail, technology is super popular on the platform for sure. I think those who maybe don't get the most out of Truffle are like, we're not built for enterprise, right? That is, it's not really our game, right? Our game is really in the small and medium business. It's super easy to set up, right? But we have intentionally chosen not to build integrations into a million different platforms, right? So we try and give people tools that are really easy, that they can get up and running in 15 minutes with Truffle, and get their hiring pipeline building.
Yeah. And so since this is the operating system show, how does that tool, your tool, help your customers with their operations and their own business operating system that they're running?
Yeah, we think that it's one of the highest leverage things, right? If you think about the amount of time that people spend on hiring, especially in that early phase, which is something that can be systematized, right? Looking at resumes is not it's not difficult. It's something that AI can absolutely do, right? If you build the right criteria to sort of rank a resume. But if you have a human looking at a resume, you think, it's late at night, right? When I start looking through these resumes, the first 20, I give them a decent amount of attention. And it's still taking me 1 to 2 minutes to look through each of them if I'm doing a reasonable job. The rest of the stack gets totally ignored, right? And one of the things is, what about those other 50? What if the perfect candidate is in there, but you just don't have the opportunity to give them that time? Or maybe you do. Maybe you are giving each of them time, but now you've spent 3 hours just looking at resumes. That doesn't even sort of speak to the amount of time then to go and do the scheduling. I've got to email all of these people. I've got to get them on a calendar. Half of them don't show up, right? And so you spent a ton of time there, where what we think is, if you can find the top 5 people that you should go and have conversations with that are most aligned with what you're looking for, and you can spend more time in that interview phase, in that one-to-one conversation, and really digging in, that's where the leverage really comes, right? And that is how you sort of put an operating model around hiring.
Yeah, I could have used your tool a while back. I had a DevOps engineer. I posted a job on LinkedIn. At the time, that was a big mistake because I got 1,800 resumes in like 3 hours. I can't. I found someone good, but it was like, who do I pick? I don't know.
It's a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah, it's a needle in a needle stack.
yeah, and they're sharp.
Yeah. So how has AI helped your operations in your business today?
Yeah. So, look, we are like fully pilled on AI in our business, and so we've built a lot of systems and processes to help automate things like content generation. We have an absolute like wizard on the marketing side, and he's got about 20 different routines that run daily that are surfacing opportunities for content and ranking and looking at site. How our site is ranking, AI mentions, all of those things, and helping us to just build more useful content right out there in the universe. So I think that's one side of things. And then from a product perspective, this one is one of the things that's most exciting to me. So we very early on, we hired a front-end developer who we really saw as being exceptional. He was really, really great, and this was sort of pre-Claude Code time. And so just this week, we have sort of made him into, work with him very closely. And he is now going to deliver the first feature based on just like a very brief outline of what the feature should look like, from, sort of product development all the way through to delivering, right? And we see this as sort of like the future. It is, it's not exactly vibe coding, right? Super smart guy, right? But now he is empowered to take a product brief and turn it into a feature in a couple of days, right? Which would have taken 3 or 4 people in the past weeks or even a month to do. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is. So let me rephrase that for everyone else listening. So first of all, vibe coding is a no-no. I don't vibe code, but I write code with AI all the time. But I know what I'm looking for since I've done it a long time. And so your front-end engineer, he's doing the job of 3 or 4 different, like a back-end engineer, and doing all the data layer and the business logic, all that. And his focus is how it looks, right? The fields and everything. I think that is really transformational. I know people want to have like a business analyst be able to write a complete product, and they can kind of, but there's so much nuanced that people don't realize until they get into it. So I like that. And I think when you have a good software development team, then it's easier to add features versus building from scratch. That's a much different lift, right? It's not as heavy.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, he's been in the weeds from the very beginning, right? So he really understands, the product and what we're trying to achieve. And I think that's really important, right? He understands the customer. Yeah. He's probably not your average individual, right? But if you can find those folks, it is truly magical what they can do.
Yeah. Well, and some people complain about young kids fresh out of college. I've met a lot of sharp people, all ages, there are a lot of people that are hungry to learn and do a good job. And so I think they just haven't found the right people. And I think that's where you come in. Like you could help them find a good culture fit. That's really what we're talking about.
That's right. Yeah. Agreed.
Excellent. I love that. That's that warms my geek heart, right?
Yeah,
my engineer
absolutely.
brain
Mine
loves
too.
this.
I was so excited. He was shipping some stuff earlier today over to me to take a look at. Right, I've been working with him very closely, and it was truly very good. It was really, really good, really thoughtful. Right, on the delivery. So I'm excited to see this go live. I think it'll be a huge boost for him and for the company overall. Right, and just seeing, and it was a decent sized feature, right? It's not like, adding a checkbox somewhere. It is truly something meaningful.
That's great. I'd love to see the post your marketing guy does about that. That's a good one. So what's next for Truffle and the hiring intelligence model that you're working on?
Yeah. So, look, we're sort of constantly improving, right? We moved very, very quickly. So there's some rough edges, I think, that we've got to continue to smooth out. Our goal is, can we do this really, really well, right? That has sort of always been my motto in the prior businesses as well. Look, there's a huge track that you could potentially take here. And we've thought about it, right? Which is, can you become sort of like the centralized hiring for small business? But, today it's, can we just do this one thing exceptionally well, right? And so we're speaking with our customers, we're listening, we're trying to figure out, hey, what else do they need, so that way we can take even more time off of their hands, and make it even easier for them to get their first job up and running, to invite candidates, to do all of those things. That's what we're really focused on today. I think the future could look a little bit different, right? One of the things that we intentionally didn't do is we didn't build an AI interviewer. I think it's kind of creepy, right, today, but maybe in the future it's good enough, right? And that people, it becomes an accepted thing to do. I don't believe that that's going to be the case for a long time, but it's not impossible, right? And so we're always sort of keeping our eyes open for what that might look like, and then also thinking about not only, we have a lot of data now on the candidates who are coming in and applying, right, to surface those signals. One of the things we'd really love to do is help to prepare people more for that in-person, for that next stage, right? So what are the gaps that a candidate has that we could help create them an interview pack to say, hey, here's the next things that you should go and you should probe on, right? That, we still don't know enough about. And I think that would be really interesting. So that's sort of in the back of our minds, and something we'll get to work on here soon.
I love that. Well, I've really appreciated you taking the time out of your day, Sean. And is there anything I missed? Is there anything you'd like to go over?
No, I think it's been a great conversation. Absolutely, really happy to have had the time, Matt.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. I really appreciate it. It was great meeting you. Once again, that's Sean Griffith, I'm sorry, the CEO and co-founder of Truffle. And if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, best place is hiretruffle.com. That's our website, so you can check it out there. Get a free trial, so anybody can poke around in the platform themselves. And to get a hold of me, it's just Sean@hiretruffle.com.
All right, love it. Thank you. And once again, that's another episode in the book, and this was the Operating System Show.